And we are live, Dragon Ballers. Welcome back to episode 5.
Welcome back to Get the Mic.
Eat the mic.
To eat the
I
mic.
thought we changed it to eat the mic since we are having so many issues with our mics.
I think that's apt at this point.
Maybe it's just a little joke here and there.
Yes, it ultimately comes down to the jankiness of our setup. But hopefully, before too long, it will be all smoothed out.
We may have to invest in a little bit more expensive mics than what we went for. Not that these are... No, they're just not as good as they could be.
No, I mean, they're definitely not the studio level mics that we wish they were, but I think they're a starting point.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
So, this episode is about Yamucha.
Yamucha.
The strong yet cruel desert bandit.
Yamucha, the kidnapping monster.
If only it said that. Now, let's have a little recap of what we went through last time.
Let's. So last time we met Oolong and got introduced to all of his bullshit with his shape-shifting and tyrannizing the village that he was holding hostage. He was forced to confront the nature of his mode of being, and I think that's symbolized by ultimately his flee from the Nimbus, his needing to be rescued by Goku in that process. And, well, we see his hat fall off, but as we'll see starting in this episode, his hat is back, so it's not gone forever. I think eventually it will be gone forever, but Oolong is, well, I would say as a self-contained episode, after the last episode, you could just walk away from it and be like, and then Oolong learned about how bad his ways were. But I think we're about to find out that that's not exactly the case.
I think it's important also to mention that that's not really how people work.
Yeah, I think that there's a more grounded nature to Dragon Ball where we're seeing these nice little self-encapsulated stories that are part of a greater mythos. And so it's like, as a standalone bottle, you can look at an episode and it's like, wow, here's the themes. They're really coming through. But then, like, that's not what the story is about. The story is about being on the path to betterment. And so you don't just get to be like, oh, I figured it out, now I'm better. I think that's part of the theme of the whole series.
Well, part of the theme that there are tiers of competence, let's say.
Sure. I mean, I'm not as familiar with that, so I'm curious to see. I know somewhat what you mean by that, but, you know.
We'll get into it as we continue on. That's going to be a reoccurring thing for sure. We're not yet, we have not yet passed our first tier of competence, so it's not too applicable here, only to mention that Oolong has not learned his lesson yet, where you might even say in other series he would have learned his lesson, possibly in that episode, and just been a quote-unquote better character for it.
Sure. I mean, I think that in a more basic, stripped-down story, it would be as simple as that. It's like, okay, that's that character's arc. They got better, and then it was kind of like, and that was that. And I think that on a first watch, you can look at Dragon Ball and say, well, the characters don't really get better. But I think that's just missing the point. Because I think there's a lot of fixation on ultimately what a character is supposed to become or what they're supposed to, like, arrive at. And this episode is going to show us immediately that it's not as simple as that. I think especially in the first set piece that we get in it.
The first set piece and conflict that we get is going to illustrate our point. So let's go ahead and get into it then. Let's go here. So the first thing that our dragon crew is talking about, let's say the dragon team, is they're talking about going to Fire Mountain. Now, Oolong seems to know about this place. Fire Mountain. And just to briefly encapsulate, he's scared of going there because he's heard of a terrifying creature called the Ox King who kills men who try to get near his castle. Immediately, we have some imagery here that we can associate with some archetypal ideas. So the king's castle, and the encapsulation of fire around it.
Right. I think that there's definitely something to be said about the idea of a castle atop a mountain that cannot be accessed because the mountain is literally on fire. There are elements to fire that imply certain things. Initially you just kind of want to point to chaos, right? And you can look at the idea of what he's describing with Fire Mountain as sort of a situation where the kingdom, let's say, that the Ox King is ruling over has fallen to chaos in a sense, and that chaos needs to be put out for him and for everybody.
Well, we'll get to that point. I just want to initially talk about that part, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, not to get deeply into it.
We will get into to why the castle's overrun by fire eventually.
Oh, definitely. But just a Fire Mountain, as far as like archetypal imagery, it's pretty strong.
I mean, it's in the Lord of the Rings, let's say.
Sure.
Right. So, Oolong is scared of going there, and his character flaw of cowardice is still shining through, right? They still need to go get the Dragon Balls. He doesn't want to go. I picked this picture in particular because he moves his ears in a way that I think can only be conveyed in animation. Certain emotions can only be conveyed in animation, and that is one of them. I think it's a good thing to have amongst animal-like humans. But the next thing here, we do see the Ox King, or what is envisioned to be the Ox King.
Yes, this is our first glimpse at the Ox King, so no idea what he could be like, but he seems pretty threatening.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a threatening, towering figure, right? Shrouded in mystery. And we'll see that recurring. The mystery of a thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is going to be more terrifying.
I think we're definitely going to be seeing, I think throughout the series too, this idea that like the idea of something when not confronted is much scarier than whenever you get to it. Not to say that the Ox King's not going to be scary, but there is that where once you've confronted and started to understand a thing, you understand it really, then it boils down to, I think it's kind of a reflection of Journey to the West as well, that once you understand something, the fight is mostly over.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of the conflicts that arise in Journey to the West could have been solved by speaking the truth instead of they try to trick people and it always backfires on them, and it turns out that they would have just told the truth in the first place. They could have avoided all the conflict.
Right.
It's one of those types. So, yeah, and I mean here it's the same thing. You speak the truth forward, the Ox King is not going to be as bad, and we'll see how that plays out. But for now, we know that Oolong is scared of the Ox King, and Bluma and Goku still want to go. Goku's still along for the ride, I would say, more or less. He hasn't really talked too much about trying to get the Dragon Balls as much as he is just enjoying the experience. But someone isn't enjoying the experience, and his name is Oolong. So he's already decided that he is going to try and escape.
Oolong has decided that even though Bulma has said, I don't know if we've gotten to this line, but Bulma says that she has Oolong along for the ride because she thinks that he's going to come in handy. At the beginning of the episode, Goku's like, I just don't understand why Oolong's with us. Mm-hmm. Bulma says, I think that his powers could come in handy. Oolong's not having much of that, and he says, all right, cool, I'm going to turn into a fish and swim down underwater.
Well, the thing is... Those cats. The thing is, poignant about this is that Bluma sees some competence in him, right? Bluma, and think about this, the, let's say, purveyor of Goku from the wilderness, right? The one who saw potential in Goku and brought that out in him, sees some potential in Oolong, and that's why she brings him along.
And then he runs away.
But then he runs away, right? And we'll see. It's more of Bluma's effect on Oolong, I think, that's being verbalized by her, that is indicating that, because it's the same thing with Goku. It happened to both of them, right? Except they react differently.
Oh yeah, well, I think that these characters, we've mentioned this before, they serve as these sounding boards for Goku at times. So we see characters acting in a way so that we can see how the simplicity of Goku's behavior against their deception or their cowardice, it's pretty clear. You don't really have to do anything complicated with Goku. A lot of the time, what Goku's doing right is what he's not doing. And in this case, right, we're seeing how Oolong's reaction is not as good as Goku's, right?
Well, it's and I want to emphasize that it's not just Oolong's reaction is not as good as Goku's, but Bulma doesn't do this to every character she meets. Let's just say.
Okay.
She sees potential in Oolong. And I don't mean like, oh, his shape-shifting powers are, I think it's more than that. I think that what she sees in Oolong is the competence that he has.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it in that way.
Because that's why she brings Goku along. She could have just tricked him out of his Dragon Ball, let's say.
Sure. Well, I think that there is a selfish element to what Bulma is doing. She keeps doing this thing where she wants people of competence around her because they are able to help her get to where she's going. I think it's being represented right now as a selfish sort of action on her part. Mm-hmm. You see in her saying that she thinks that Oolong will be useful. And I think that there's another element to this scene that we're about to talk about as well. What with the fish in the water. Because as we see, Oolong dives down into the water, and Goku says, "Don't worry, I'll go get him." But he can't do it. And anytime in a story like this where I see Goku can't do a thing that seems simple that Goku should just be able to do, immediately I feel like I need to take a step back and say, okay, well, why is it that specifically in this situation Goku couldn't do this?
I'm interested to hear, because I don't think we have a picture of it.
Of specifically Goku not being able to. I mean, it's just naked pictures of Goku, but I think my idea of this scene at the beginning, right? I think it's significant that they are in the water and that they're traveling along the water, and they're in a river, but essentially they're in the water. And the place that Oolong goes is he dives down in the depths of the water to a place that Goku cannot go himself. And the only way that we can get Oolong back, of course, is through Bulma's actions, and she brings him back up from the water by luring him with her panties.
Well, let's not get there yet, because I do want to talk about why Goku can't. Now, what can Goku do?
He can soar above the water.
He can soar in the sky, right? Now, sky is most often in mythological stories equated with the logos, the masculine, right?
Right.
The water and the earth are typically seen as feminine.
Right. And you can see that also in the upward and downward triangles.
Yeah, exactly. But in this instance, right, he decides to hide himself in something unclear, right?
Yes.
So it is poignant that Goku cannot get to him, and we'll see.
Well, I think that
water is actually one of the only things that Goku is unable to overcome ever.
I think that a part of that is that water represents a sort of unconscious thing in psychoanalysis as well, where you can see if somebody in a dream is going down underwater, that typically is them representing a thought to themselves about like delving into themselves, into the unconscious or the subconscious. And I don't think that Goku's all that introspective. It's just that's not one of his strengths. He's very outward, he's very action oriented, but he's not the type of person who's going to focus his thoughts inwards, let's say. And so this is, I would say, at the bottom of the river is not Goku's domain. It's not a place that he spends a lot of time because he doesn't need to. It's a place that Oolong's familiar with because he is pathologizing his behavior. And he exists in a space where he needs to constantly be in a state of conversation with himself, let's say, because he is at times deceiving himself so that he can deceive other people too. And so I thought it was significant that here we are in this river, you know, at the beginning of this episode, and immediately we have this motif.
Well, I think water also, like in, let's say, Bloodborne, represents the subconscious, right?
Right.
And who better to awaken you, let's say, than how he does get captured? And you said it earlier.
Right, the feminine gaze, so to speak, is that awakening element.
An awakening as in luring him out of his dwelling in the subconscious, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that is effective where Goku's brute strength, let's say, is not. I think it's poignant that we say it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that Goku's brute strength isn't the thing that will bring Oolong
Let's say
back
not
from
even
that
Goku's
spot.
brute strength. Let me rephrase that because that's imprecise. I want to say the logos is not enough to do that. You cannot convince someone when they're emotionally bound in their subconscious.
There, yeah. So you're articulating it in a way that I've been trying to figure out how to say. But yeah, that's essentially the idea, is that Oolong is someone who doesn't answer to anybody but himself, except in a sort of situation like this where the call is on him to rise back to at least the baseline level of being, right? And here we see that he just cannot avoid it. It defeats him immediately.
And what is sufficient to get someone who's emotionally bound in their subconscious is, what would you say, the allure of what would you say?
I would say on an archetypal level, it's almost just the ever-present nature of sexual selection.
There we go. Right.
Our evolution, right? And it's sort of the call to further.
It's a
your
fundamental
being.
call, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost a call from nature.
That's what I was
herself.
trying to articulate there. So you got it. So, and that's how Oolong is then.
I do want to point out, right before this happens, though, Goku becomes aware, quote unquote, of Oolong's nature in the world because Oolong says, "I'm the man." Goku turns to Oolong and pats his crotch and says, "You are a man," which kicks off this whole scene.
Right. Is there anything else you want to comment about that?
I'd like to know what you think of that.
I think it's Goku's. It's not so much his realization that men exist, as it is that just because someone has the, let's say, proper genitalia to match the masculine gender doesn't necessarily mean that they embody the masculine spirit.
Right. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. It looks like our chat's not updating again.
Oh, shite. There we go. I would say, let's say to chat, and it's going to update here in a second. I should. Yeah, there we go. I would say that Bluma does not see potential in Master Roshi because he doesn't have youth.
Yeah, I would say Bulma sees or saw Master Roshi as sort of a means to an end rather than someone who could help her. She wanted to get something from him, and it sort of plays into that mutual lie in a sense that we had talked about, where he approached her in the way that it seemed like he just wanted to get something from her. And,
it's reciprocal.
And it was reciprocal from her too. She had her end that she wanted, and then neither of them really learned from the situation. So I think that if Bulma had seen the potential in Master Roshi, the entire series would be completely different.
Right.
Because then she would have already been much further along in her development as a character, I think.
Oh, but these characters don't develop.
Oh yeah, I forgot. She's a blue-haired girl. Sometimes
Anyhow.
she's naked.
Anyways. So yeah, I think ultimately that's what it is. Goku realizing that someone can have the masculine form without embodying the masculine spirit. And that's what Oolong is. He's a man, technically. He doesn't embody any masculine traits. Any positive ones, let's say.
Right.
So, because of that, because he doesn't embody any of those positive masculine traits. Oh, we gotta talk about this.
Run away, I'll slice you up and eat you.
We just thought this one was pretty funny.
It's just great. Well, there is a thing here, I guess you could say, because Goku, we pointed out that after a certain point, then Goku doesn't just indeterminately eat whoever he comes across, right? He is more discerning in the way that he acts in that sense. And then it's almost this threat that's like, you keep running away and I won't view you as the same type of thing that I am.
Well, I won't value you, right? You'll have shown that you like lunch bucket, let's say, or that you're a beast, right? That you're a beast, that you can't be contained.
Exactly.
But you have you're not useful in any way, right? You're not amusing in any way.
Sure.
And so that's what happens. You're devoured by. You can be devoured by your own sense of what you know to be right if you don't continue on that path.
Yes, I had not interpreted it that way, but it is certainly...
That's why I'm so fascinated with the sub, because the sub is crazy.
The sub is very interesting. I think that there's going to be a lot to take out of the sub. There's some funny stuff about it in this episode with the sub as well, just these odd changes.
Yeah, because in the dub, Goku says, "Did you eat all the food again?" or something like that.
Yeah, so I have some notes here, and I wrote, Oolong has eaten all of the food. Because when I was watching the dub, that was what was said
but
here.
But this is more mythological, and that's, I think, why I wanted to grab it, yeah.
Yeah, the meaning is definitely coming through, and that's something that Chrysombra in the chat had mentioned too, that the subs say some things like the Roshi originally calling a phoenix, saying that he would have called a phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Little things like that on their surface sound like, oh, it's just a different joke, but I think that the further we get, the more we're going to be seeing things like this.
Yeah, for sure. But that's what that is, I think, and that's why we were saying Goku earlier was eating other creatures. But we did want to mention that. Here, Bluma gives Oolong a pill.
So I can't remember. In the dub, she calls it a vitamin. And I think that she calls it candy in the sub.
Yep.
I think that is also significant. It makes more sense to me that it would be candy than a vitamin. It's opposites. really. One, eating candy, if you're just going to interpret it as representing anything other than literally eating candy, you can see it as a childlike thing. Like, candy is for children, vitamins are for adults. So I find it really strange that changes here from dub to sub, because
Well, also, what is the intention behind eating a vitamin? You're trying to improve your health, right?
right.
Whereas the candy, you're not.
Well,
So,
it
yeah,
says something different about Oolong if he's indulging in candy for what's about to happen, rather than
Well, no, I think that's the point. Is that it's that she's preying on his. She knows, right, that he can't help but be hedonistic like this.
yes. I think that, well, after she sees, I think that there's a progression here. After she sees
Right, she's
that
developing.
she can control him,
Mm-hmm.
right, with her, let's say, I'd like to talk about Bulma's panties for a second, because
Her feminine wiles, yes.
because it was very interesting to kind of contextualize it when they were missing, as it was sort of her modesty that was gone, right? And I think that idea of false modesty, or maybe projected false modesty in a sense, is also part of it. I think that it's you could interpret this scene as, if it were happening not in a river, let's say, it would be a more literal thing, that Bulma is realizing that she can manipulate Oolong through that false modesty to get him to do whatever she wants, whenever she wants. And so she's coming to that realization now that, and this is all, I think, this is all mental, this is all subconscious.
Well,
This whole scene, I feel like, is because they're in the river, but so I feel like this whole scene is a representation of a realization, in a sense, at least for Bulma.
to indicate that, yeah.
To indicate that she's
that-
come to terms with the fact that she could do this.
Well, no, that attractive women can control weak men.
Exactly.
That's the point of this exercise here, or this vitamin candy, whatever we're calling it, right?
Right.
And so we have a morally weak Oolong, and let's say this: why doesn't Goku eat any?
Well, Bulma says, it's not for you, Goku. And I think that's just because she realizes that he's pure.
That it doesn't matter.
It doesn't work on Goku.
Right.
Because he sees her for who she really is, right? He's like, why would I want to see your dirty old fanny?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Goku sees right through it. So, you could get the same point across if she just gave him the candy and it didn't work. But I
It's
think
also
it's more clear this way.
out of spite too that Oolong eats it. He's like angry about it.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to take it. He's kind of
Not-
grumbling when he takes
Yeah,
it.
yeah, but he still eats it. All right, so let's continue here. None. Yeah, here it is. None for you.
None for you, Goku.
And look at that. Look at the simp face. That is the face
Oh,
of a
God.
simp. If I look at that.
Oh, just look at him.
Good job, Goku. Not even paying
Look at his
attention.
simp face and his cool hat.
Cool, so cool.
That's a really cool hat.
But seriously, like here it is. It's none for you. It's not for you, right?
Yeah, this behavior is not for you.
Well, I think this exercise and exerting power is not something that Bulma could even do on Goku. She tried it already, like you said. But I think at this point they run out of gas.
Yes. And now they're stuck in the middle of the water. And since I'm making this analogy, that I think that this whole scene is a representation of what is happening in our characters' heads, being stuck in the water now without a way forward is it can take on a different meaning. Because I think that it happens immediately after Bulma has given Oolong this vitamin candy, because she no longer can progress without using it. She has, in a sense,
Oh, you're
damaged her character and now must rely on those actions because she has let them take root in her mind and I don't want to say define, but they are, I don't know. How would you put it?
I think you're on the right track. But so I just want to continue a little bit more on where they get here. So Oolong transforms and they're able to paddle to shore, right?
Well,
but hold on, I am going to come back to that. So being in the middle there happens right after Bluma exercises her control over a man for the first time.
Right.
Now, what does she lose by that?
Ultimately, she loses the use of her capsules.
Right, her connection to her ancestry, right? That purity.
Right, I think the connection to her ancestry, I kept sitting on this part and thinking about it and trying to find a way to articulate the idea that when she does this, she no longer can rely on her ancestry.
Yes.
And I feel like there's a more salient way of putting it, though. Like, other than just saying her ancestry, how would you put it in a more layman's analysis if you didn't know what that meant for the character?
So what we mean is that once you enter into a bargain with, if you're a woman, let's say, once you enter into a bargain like the one that Bluma has just entered into, she has forfeited the ability to call upon her paternal spirit, right?
And now must rely on...
benefit her. And now must... yes, exactly.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And that, I knew that all, like, I was waiting for this part.
I knew you knew.
I was waiting for this part, and it does. It happens exactly when this happens.
Mm-hmm.
They're no longer able to progress. It's only by using her own crude ways that she can even get to shore. And the travel isn't going to be so smooth now that she's forfeited that ability to connect to the positive masculine.
Right, and before this image, too, she asks Oolong if he can turn into a tank of gas. And he says, no, it doesn't work that way. And that is to say that you don't get to have your cake and eat it, too, in this sense.
Right.
Bulma does not get to keep operating the way that she was and still get to use Oolong's powers, let's say. She doesn't still get to bring Oolong along against his will.
Mm-hmm.
And
she doesn't get to make someone a slave without compromising. And that is another thing if you look at it that way. You can't make someone a slave
without compromising your own freedoms.
Right.
Well, not technically, but you compromise
your freedom
within yourself.
Well, your freedom to be forthright in the world, let's say.
Right. You compromise.
You slightly corrupted your character.
Yeah, I keep wanting to come back to the word character, but I mean, it ultimately comes down to that. When you compromise the strength of your character by relying on the strength of somebody else, you find yourself in this position.
I don't know if it's even relying.
Well, not relying, but
because she's forcing him. Yeah, it's even more than that.
Well, it's almost a pathologization, right? It's this situation where not only is she relying on it, she is she is putting a force on an aspect of being and deciding for herself that she deserves for the masculine spirit to do what she wants it to do. And it's almost like the universe saying, okay, let's see how far it gets you. Well, he can't turn into a tank of gas.
Right.
He can turn into a paddle.
Right. And it should be a lesson to and I think it might even be poignant in this day and age for women who do use men, is that then you're not going to be able to rely on what you need, that strength that you need to from your, let's say, logos, your ability to discern in the world and sort out order and chaos, because you've slightly corrupted your own path by compromising what you know to be right.
Yes, and it's going to be a long journey if you don't have the Nimbus or your capsules.
Right. right? And we talked about how that gets you far. That can get you really far, but she loses them.
Chrysombra says, at this point, Oolong, Goku, and the boat are all hungry, and Bulma is not.
The boat is hungry. Oh, oh, I see what you're doing. Well, she's got simp. She's got simp money.
Yeah, she found a simp to bring along.
Yeah, and I mean, there she is.
She
fed. Want a slave? Here you go. The case with all my capsules is gone.
So this is when
inexplicably
they have finally arrived on the shore. And I also do want to point out, she didn't paddle.
No,
she had Goku.
She makes Goku paddle, right?
Just to further cement what's going on with her character right now. And of course, now her capsules are no longer of any use to her.
No,
and
none.
Capsules are definitely an interesting part of this type of analysis because I don't think we see it in this episode, but in the next episode, the capsules are going to start coming back, and it's not just going to be Bulma's capsules.
Right. This is where really it's not going to be so much of, symbolically speaking, of her ability to do that, right? Her
right
power, let's say, right, that we talked about in episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be more dealing with the tech of the world that we'll get into.
Right. I think also they just serve a good purpose, like in the sense, if you want someone to hand someone else a house to tell a message to your audience, it's pretty convenient if you have a capsule to do that.
Yeah.
So we can't overlook the fact that now that this has been introduced, it's going to be utilized throughout the story and doesn't necessarily always mean... I don't think it's always going to mean the same thing.
Right. The capsules will mean different things as we go on, especially...
But for Bulma, the capsules definitely mean this.
At this point.
Especially considering, it literally is her ancestry. She has inherited them from Capsule Corporation, owned by her family. So, I think that it's a really solid part of her, but I don't think that capsules mean the same things to every character that they would to the person who have inherited them.
Right. And notice one more thing. She hasn't actually made Oolong do anything yet. He doesn't even have to know that she's exerting that kind of force on him.
She knows. He doesn't know.
And that's enough for her to lose this.
Right. And that's why this is in her head. Why, when they're in the water, this is sort of a subconscious, not subconscious, but at least an internal process that we're seeing represented, because
it's an internal interfacing with Oolong, right?
Right. As far as what this scene would mean for Goku, I don't think it means anything for Goku other than he's watching it.
Yeah, it's and that's a lot. That's a lot of what kids do is just watch, right? And I think that's a poignant reason why Goku in this season in particular is rather passive as a character.
Right. He is along for the ride, but doing the right thing. It's sort of like he's got the Nimbus now. Not literally. He's got the Nimbus.
Well, I mean, he could call on it.
Yeah.
At any time.
So he's along for their ride, is what I should say.
Right. So let's continue. And it is their ride because now they are linked.
Yes.
Pretty much forever.
I mean, this cements it.
We can't go anywhere now.
Goku's looking at her like, what do you mean we?
And think about that. The feminine spirit who's broken all attachment to her ability to sort through things, like Sleeping Beauty, let's say, is not able to move. Unable to move. Immobile.
Unable to go anywhere now.
Right. And Bluma, luckily, she's confronted some of the evils in the world, so she's not unconscious, but she is immobile.
Yes, I think that we're seeing a more literal interpretation of that idea here, where it's like you've crippled yourself, but we don't have to necessarily have you literally unconscious. It's just that you're not so conscious now.
Right. You've lost some of that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I think Oolong is trying to escape, I believe. Yes.
I love this. Hell if I'm going to that freaky mountain. Almost every frame we get Oolong, he's got a funny face. I love every Oolong face we get.
Oolong is a wonderfully designed character.
Definitely.
But here, yeah, it's him exhibiting another, let's say, negative character aspect, being cowardice, right? He's too scared to go with them to what he views as like a hell, right?
Yeah, I think that to him, he's looking at it like the fear of the unknown manifested in just like all of its potential danger to him. He's just like, I don't want to do that. Like,
well, that's the
that's not what I do.
neurotic. That's the neurotic way that you experience fear when you're a coward, right?
Right. It's like the harsh lines that we saw painting what the Ox King could really be like. Since we haven't seen him yet, that's the way that Oolong imagines him, right?
But anyway, so now he's gonna try to escape when Bluma is at her lowest, but he's also somewhat complicit in this bargain, this simp thought relationship, let's say.
Yeah.
He's not free of it either. And so, Bluma, knowing that at least she can still do this, right? The last pathology she can still exert, right? She's like, I've already sacrificed it. I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to let, let's say, what I paid for go to waste.
Sure. Yeah, and she's gleefully calling it out too here. The idea of what's happening, essentially just from scene to scene, she's like, I can't go anywhere, and now she's just grinning.
Well, this is almost sadistic.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
She may not consciously realize that it was Oolong, her interface with Oolong that made her lose her capsules, but she needs someone to blame because it can't be her fault, right?
How could it?
So here she shouts out this, and it makes Oolong.
It makes Oolong. Well, it turns his bowels to water, let's say.
Right, let's say, but I was more meaning it's embarrassing. That's how she controls him, which is just as a thought might control a simp, or a woman might control a morally weak man, right?
Right.
Calling him a best friend thing in front of other people if like the man wants to be romantic with her, like friend zoning them, things like that, right?
Yeah, I think that there's an aspect of this too, because right before this happens, we see Goku. He's like, I gotta pee. And he runs over and just like drops trow and starts pissing into the water.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious if you think that it's intentional that Toriyama made this scene about what was happening internally for these characters. Because like I said, Goku's just along for the ride. Goku just takes a piss on it. He just doesn't, it doesn't mean anything to him. But the fact that he, right before this, just drops trow and starts pissing in front of the two of them, and they're like, he'll go anywhere. And then we see that Oolong is ashamed every time that he needs to go. I think that there is something that also calls back to what happened in our last episode with Goku needing to pee whenever he was dressed up as a girl. And that sort of revealing his, how would I put it?
His need to be forthright about his
Well, not
being.
just that. Revealing his vulnerability.
Oh, okay, yes.
And then also Oolong is ashamed of his vulnerability.
Right, but that's exactly it. And how do women control men in that way? Is they make them self-conscious of their vulnerability.
Right, and you could think also if Bulma could do this to Goku, he would just go right there. He wouldn't. We've
and it would
seen
actually
right
backfire on Bluma.
Yeah, because then she would never
likely.
want to do it again, because she would be like, oh,
That's
it would
disgusting.
be laid bare
Yeah.
what she was doing. And she's relying on Oolong's shame to keep doing it, right? Because if she had to watch Oolong,
But think
she would
about
never
the
do it.
thoughts that shame their viewers into giving them money.
Oh, yeah. They're like, really? You can't afford to give a $5 donation for all the entertainment that I give you?
It's true. So that's what's going on here. And gleefully, Bluma makes Oolong suffer. And when someone who eat it get diarrhea when someone says PP. So Toriyama may not be the most articulate fucking bard in this situation, but he's able to convey exactly the idea, because like we said, this is about being embarrassed about your vulnerabilities, not so much about pee pee poo poo.
Guys, what do you think he meant by this?
Even though it's basically pee pee poo poo.
It basically is pee pee poo poo, but I do want to point out a couple of other things about this. Whenever this happens, Goku's initial reaction is to call Bulma a witch and then square up on her.
No, we'll get to that. Not yet. We got shots of it.
Do we have it?
Yeah. Don't go there yet. But I do want to say that, yes, in the dub, Piggy is said instead of P.
Yes.
I think that was for censorship reasons, probably.
Probably. I mean, he's based on Piggy, and so it also just might be a nod in that sense.
It still doesn't matter. Like, calling him a pig is revealing his vulnerabilities.
It is true. She is just calling his name because he is embodying this.
Yeah, so either way, it's still... But I think it's good to mention, right? But, yeah, so let's go ahead and get to it.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
Yeah, so he says, "You really are a witch."
Because now Goku knows that she's exerting this kind of power over somebody else.
And then Bulma responds with, "Nah, it's cool, he's complicit." And then Goku goes, "Oh, this is hilarious." That's basically what this whole scene is.
But no, I think it's poignant, because the Logos would see someone who's emotionally manipulating others as someone who is outside of the realm of sorting order and chaos in the proper way, which magic is not that, right?
Right, it's outside of the realm of self-honesty.
Well, let's say, sorry, speaking magic words to do good. This is how I should phrase it. Speaking magic words to do good is what Goku does. Speaking magic words to do evil
is what a witch does.
Right, exactly.
Yes. And so we see that. At first, I didn't understand why it would be that Bulma could stop Goku from being mad at her when this happens. And I think it ultimately just comes down to the weakness in Oolong's character.
Yeah, it's exactly it.
Because once Goku recognizes that it's a reflection of Oolong's weakness just as much as Bulma's weakness, then he says, "Okay, well, we'll see."
Well, he can say it too, right? He can say it to him too.
Yeah.
Because
well, he can shame him.
Yeah, he can shame him.
It's basically just him calling him a simp.
Yes. It's simp. Well, I guess we can't actually put this on Twitch now if we ever wanted to. We've used simp way too many times.
Oh, well.
Guess
I can't be on Twitch.
Darn. But anyway, so yeah, he can call him a simp, but I think that is the difference between someone speaking magic words, let's say, and doing harm, as in somebody that is misconstruing truth in order to, let's say, deceive people, right?
Right.
That's not something... Bluma's not deceiving Oolong here. He knows exactly what's happening.
Exactly. So then he's like, "Oh, you're not actually a witch.
She's not embodying any of those...
equally reprehensible."
She's not embodying any of those parts of the unholy trinity as much as she is symbolically sharing them with Oolong.
Right.
So, yes, Goku thinks they're a witch. And then here we go. This is more actually of what we were talking about. So I wanted to put this in because, looks like Brok has some stuff. Speaking of, let's take a little second here to say, I'm Owl, the host on your left. I realize we didn't say this time. We need to get in the routine of saying it.
We do need to work on our routines of opening and closing. And
Yeah,
I'm
we
Brok.
just
I'm your
start.
host on the right.
Yeah, okay. Well, there we have it.
Well, I like that you grabbed this because it's a little bit different in the dub. Goku in the dub says, he tells Oolong, maybe this wouldn't happen to you if you acted nicer.
Yes. Yes. I think I actually mentioned that when we grabbed it.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, here we have him saying, good thing I didn't eat one. I'm a good person.
Which both are imprecise ways of articulating the idea that this could not control someone who is not, let's say, ashamed of their weaknesses.
Right. Good thing I'm not ashamed of my own vulnerabilities.
Right. Otherwise, I could end up like this.
Otherwise, people could manipulate me.
Right. And especially because I actually just had an idea bringing up what Dr. Peterson talks about in regards to setting yourself in order, right?
Right.
So he's saying if you don't set yourself in order and you don't have a place to stand, let's say, then someone else is going to hand you a place to stand on a plate and make you a puppet of their goals, right? And that's what Oolong has fallen to that. And what Goku's saying here is it's a good thing I have a path, because if I didn't have a path, someone else could put me on their path.
Right.
So multiple levels of analysis here, but right. And Oolong is not happy about this. If we go back a few, this might be a good contrast of his face in this picture. His face in this picture.
Mm-hmm. I love how we can see just such a range of emotions in the characters. Like,
they're so
Bulma
expressive.
and Oolong are both just smug as shit one moment and also miserable the next.
It's the neuroticism.
Yeah.
Goku's very low
face,
in neuroticism.
I mean, you just see Goku. He's always contented. He's always got at least a small smile on his face, except when he sees someone acting like a witch.
Here he's confused, yeah. Here he thinks he's a witch. But right, we see the two. So let's continue. And I just wanted to scroll back. I know that's a little ways. Sorry about that. But let's go ahead and continue. Bluma says, well, I may have sacrificed my ability to, let's say, walk the way, travel on the way, because I've done this thing. At least this thing will help me get there, right, where I need to be.
Right. So this is kind of the ultimate test of
Her
whether
trade-off.
or not Bulma has made a mistake in deciding to act this way. And she says, okay, well, at least Oolong can get me where I'm going, right? And we see that doesn't quite work out. I think that's just because that mode of being is inferior to listening to the wisdom of your ancestry, let's say, or maybe your conscience.
Right. You can't say that a simp will help me be fulfilled.
Right.
Will bring meaning to my life.
Well,
what is more meaningful, right?
Well, we can see the contrast here too, where Goku's just like, he's looking down on this whole situation from his nimbus. And so I think it comes through pretty clear that neither Bulma nor Oolong are where they want to be now.
They're both mired in more chaos than they can't soar in the skies like Goku. They don't have the logos. The spirit of the father is not within either of them.
Exactly.
So, and since that's the case, Oolong cannot help her do what she needs to do.
Right, he is insufficient. He is just a tool. He is not a mode of transportation.
And so, right,
So
he's not a method by which you can travel the path.
Yeah.
So he adds insult to injury by showing her further all that he's after and all that he thinks of when he sees her, right, is that lust. So he transforms into a pair of panties
and gets slapped down. Because, well, I mean, this is it, right? So he's simping. And now he's like, okay, well,
guess I'll simp.
So anyway, about this whole me maybe getting in there situation.
Yeah, like, you know, now that I'm a male ally, you know, I've paid my dues, right?
Right, so why don't you just put me on? And then I can ride you on the way there.
Well, that's the thing. That may be an maybe a cautionary tale of false liberation for women, right? It's not liberating to exercise your power over men in that way.
Right. I think that it's also not liberating for men, and we're seeing that in Oolong as well, where, well, what Oolong wants out of the situation is immediately smacked down whenever he says it, right? So,
well, not only that, but he can't escape anymore.
So he is now trapped.
He can't just change into a rocket like he did in the last episode and try to speed off, because he used to be able to soar in the sky.
Mm-hmm. Yes, what used to be his power is now a tool for somebody else to use for their own ends.
And so he's grounded, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
In more ways than one.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
And so Goku asks, why can't they just walk? So they start walking to the fiery mountain.
You sure are weak. Yeah, I have it here. Goku says, I gave up my cloud to walk with you two. Now try to keep up. I just like that wording.
I do like it, but it's not like he actually gave up the
right.
Nimbus.
He's just saying, on this journey that you guys are on,
I'm going at your pace.
I can't go on my cloud, so I have to go at your pace now, right? So the least you could do is just try.
Right. And here, you sure are
weak. We can
weak.
see how hard they're trying.
They're not trying. They're morally weak. Both of them are so morally weak they cannot travel in a manner, in any kind of manner. They're struggling through what is needlessly hard, only hard by their own design.
Right, and now they are in the desert.
And they go from let's say, a set piece of water to no water.
To zero water.
The
you could
subconscious
say that this
is drowned
no
up.
self-consciousness.
Right. None. No consciousness.
I think that the desert is it's like loaded with archetypal symbology. You know, you can see it in the Exodus style where your belief system or your mode of being has been stripped away and now you have to start from the ground up again. I definitely see
that's part of it.
Where Goku doesn't have to be in the desert. Like, it's not his journey to be in the desert. He's fine. But both Oolong and Bulma are now in their own desert. They are at the point where they need to build, right? They don't have anything to stand on in that sense because it's just a barren wasteland for them.
Right. They may have been able to achieve some semblance of success in the past, but every time that you reach one of those plateaus, you have to once again enter the desert and start building again, right?
Right.
Your belief system will crash down, you'll build it back up. Your belief system will crash down, you'll build it back up. And we'll see that happen. But I think it's poignant also to note who we find in the desert, the place that is void of self-consciousness.
Well, before we get to this,
Whoa.
I don't think we have a shot of it. But what does Bulma do at the end of this scene?
Oh, yes. She chooses to go to sleep.
She throws a tantrum and then just goes to sleep. Literally goes unconscious.
Right. The unconscious part that we were talking about earlier is she's actually choosing that now.
Willfully.
Right, willfully. She's a little stronger than Aurora, let's say, that once she discovers a little bit about the tragedy of life and her mortality, that she decides she'd rather be asleep forever. Bulma decides that because the desert is really tough to get through, she would rather not even think about it and not address the problem and not face it forthrightly, even further solidifying the phrase, "You sure are weak."
Morally.
So we find this guy there in this place that's void of all self-consciousness.
There's a lot going on with this. I want to point out immediately that Yamcha is sitting alone at a table for two. And actually in front of him, across from him, is his sword.
On the other third, you're saying?
Sorry.
On the other third of the screen?
Right. Well, he should be sitting across from what he wants, right? Which would be a girlfriend. Because he is, well, we'll see. But
whoa.
I just want to talk about this image before we move past it because I think this thing's just packed.
Right. No, I wasn't saying we move past it, but I think
what he's really sitting across from is what I was wanting to point out.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the cave, right? Look at what he's looking at. All these things that he's stolen because he's a thief.
It's all things.
It's all things. And he's facing away from the light in the scene coming from outside. And
And
I agree with you that he is sitting across, that it's poignant that he's sitting across from an empty chair that's a table for two, right? He is not conscious. He has almost no connection with his feminine form, or his feminine aspect, let's say, and that is in the form of puar.
right, so puar is an interesting aspect of this. And I think that this is supposed to serve as a parallel or maybe a reflection of what's happening in the other half of the story. Because Yamcha has already gone into the desert and he has started to try to fill his life with meaning again. The way that Yamcha is doing it is through all of the things that he can get.
Right.
And in doing so, he has separated an aspect from himself, you could say. Or I don't want to say necessarily, it's unincorporated. And
yes,
now speaks to him outside as an outside force.
You have to understand, though, it's a perfect mirror for the relationship between Bluma and Oolong.
Right. So we have this sort of dominated masculine, and now we have a dominated feminine aspect.
Exactly. And they both have similar abilities.
Mm-hmm.
They can both shapeshift. Only the one who's more akin to chaos can shapeshift a little bit better, let's say.
Right.
But I want to stay on this image here, and so
there is one other element of this image that I want to get to at the end of the episode.
Okay. You should have had me put it in again at the end. Oh well.
We'll just run back to it.
Sure. What I was gonna say is Puar is in that spot, in the same area of the screen that the feminine should be in this case, right? And that's how we can tell a few things about Puar, even without knowing her abilities in the future. One more thing I want to note is that I believe that this begins with Puar looking in the spyglass. Yeah.
Right. Puar is the one that finds them.
Right. And that's I think poignant to say that this disembodied female aberration, let's say, or character, is what awakens Yamcha to these opportunities in the first place.
Right. It
That
is
bit of
listening to
chaos.
that voice that he has separated from himself and dominated
Right.
that leads him to something more than just things.
Right, and we see the things here, and we'll get to the separation there. But he goes down because Puar spots our troop, right? And we'll come back to this, I suppose. You're right. We will come back to this. I already know when we're coming back to this. All right. So I am Yamcha, the hyena who has made this desert his stronghold. I think it's interesting he calls himself hyena in the sub, because hyenas are, although they are formidable beasts, one of them is not too much of a threat, and they're also creatures who laugh, right? The laughter of those creatures makes them less threatening, let's say. And the dog symbology is not lost on Yamcha in that idea, right?
Well, Yamcha thinks of himself as a lone wolf, right?
Right.
And calling himself a hyena here is kind of odd if you don't necessarily understand that. I think he needs to say that because he's not really a wolf. Like, the lone wolf is not a wolf pack.
Right. He doesn't. That's not what he actually wants deep down. Is he doesn't actually want to be a lone wolf. Right. And a hyena, also, the hyenas are controlled by matriarchs.
Oh, this is true. I didn't even think about that.
So, Yamcha, this force that is being guided by his feminine side, let's say, with Puar, guiding him to these characters here, calls himself a hyena the first thing he sees them.
Immediately. I have a note that Yamcha can traverse the desert with ease. His motorcycle hovers and kicks up these clouds behind him when he's moving around, almost like a false nimbus.
Oh, I see. Yes, an obfuscation.
Right, like now he can traverse the desert easily because as he says here, he's made the desert his stronghold. Well, he's familiar with the desert now. He's been here a while.
He's mastered the competency he needs to traverse the desert.
This tier of competency, so to speak.
This microcosm of a tier, right? Exactly. And so he has mastered the desert, but he's not gone past it.
Right. He is guided towards something more meaningful. And now everybody is coming together to confront.
Interestingly, though, I would say that it's what would have happened to Bulma if she would have stayed asleep in the desert forever, let's say.
Sure.
When you never move beyond the desert.
Right.
And, let's go on here. So we do have a picture of Puar. We've talked about her a little bit, but Brock specifically wanted me to put this picture in.
I did.
Yeah, you were like, let's get one of Puar hugging Yamcha's leg.
Oh, yeah, because Puar is just this dominated feminine aspect and even calls him master. So I wanted...
hides behind his leg and, like, very much more subdued, because Oolong will speak out against Bulma in front of other people, right?
Right. And the spirit of Puar, let's say, is a much more... subdued is a good word. Because it is a feminine aspect and not a masculine aspect, it
is more comfortable in that situation? Is that...
I would say that for Yamcha, it is easier to dominate his feminine aspect than it is for Bulma to dominate a masculine aspect. It takes more for Bulma. Like, Yamcha didn't have to feed a trick vitamin / piece of candy to Puar to manipulate Puar. Like, Puar is happy and grateful, in a sense, to be serving Yamcha.
And to help Yamcha succeed, right? That feminine aspect is a positive force, trying to move you towards self-consciousness, right? Women make men conscious. And so this is the reverse of that, I suppose. The kind of a reverse of the symbiotic relationship. One is being mutually good, right? And the other one is being mutually bad. Both host and
right. And in a sense, this is a way for our gang to maybe just skip this step of the process where they get lost in the desert and then have to figure out a way to reincorporate towards a positive end, let's say.
Right,
because they
and
can
we'll
learn
get
it
to
from
that.
Yamcha.
We will get to that for sure.
But I think that's
I was
that's
talking about
cool.
what our chat just said.
Yeah, that is definitely going to come up.
Right, and it is a spirit that's. I think that's why the fact that Yamcha is a thief, but the audience doesn't really discredit him too much for it, is because it seems like his interactions. Well, we'll get to his interactions with the party in a minute, but his interactions are done in a way that is not as, let's say, manipulative as Oolong, right?
Right. He's very straightforward.
Give me your capsules. Nothing bad will happen, right? That's what he says. But let's go on to his interactions, because he introduces himself first to Goku and Oolong, and as we said before, Bluma's asleep, so she is not there.
She is not witnessing this interaction.
So runs into endless potential in someone on the path and a simping communist pig. And so the battle ensues because Goku refuses to hand over anything. Obviously, he is able to discern and separate chaos and order by telling the truth. Here he is going to do the same thing with a thief. And it's interesting how he does it. But I put this picture in. I'm interested to know what you have to say about it.
About this image specifically, I think it might be time for us to talk about bladed weapons, because this is not the first desert bandit looking character with a bladed weapon that we have seen.
That's true. We already saw the bear bandit.
Yes.
He also had a scimitar.
I think that bladed weapons are a representation of something that you could interpret when you compare them against the power pole, because Goku doesn't fight with a bladed weapon. He fights with a blunted weapon. He doesn't fight to kill. He fights to win.
Right, and that I think it's actually a good point you're making about the bladed weapons and the deadliness, let's say, of what they have in their arsenal or what they're willing to do.
Right.
So, right. Additionally, I would say that most of the time, these bladed weapons, when they're trying to inflict true malice on people, it usually backfires.
Right, and that happens almost immediately in this scene, because as he attacks Goku, I don't know if we have a shot of this, but he almost cuts Puar.
Right. His eagerness to destroy his enemies blinds him to the fact that he could be endangering others around him.
Well, I don't think it's just that. I think that he is in danger of damaging that voice, that feminine aspect that is trying to elevate him beyond this way of being.
Right.
By acting like this. And you could say that if he keeps doing this, eventually he will kill that voice.
Right, if you act recklessly enough, right, you'll sever your tie to what is trying to make you conscious.
Yes.
Right. And especially when you are trying to destroy, let's say, an embodiment of truth.
Especially that.
And so it's poignant to note that this is how the first bout goes, right?
Right. So he is defeated by the power pole, and I think that the power pole is something that immediately just wrecks him, because the power pole is the wisdom of ancestry that Goku has that Yamcha just does not have, and if he had it, he would not be here.
He wouldn't be in the desert, right?
Yes.
He's already sacrificed it, and he sacrificed it by possibly stealing. We don't know his exact backstory.
Right.
But that could be how you compromise. One of the ways you can compromise your access to that ancient wisdom is by knowingly doing things that are wrong. You know that stealing is wrong, and therefore you've broken your pact with God, let's say.
Well, we see this with Goku as well. At the beginning of Goku's story, he doesn't have a lot of things. He is sustaining himself, but he already has the wisdom from Grandpa Gohan that isn't the meaning behind things, so to speak. That shouldn't be his meaning to life. And so that is something that Yamcha just doesn't have. And of course, Yamcha wants the power pole.
Well, he's... Is that how he recognizes Goku?
Yes, so he says, I recognize that. That's the power pole. Who is your grandpa?
He can he and that is something that Yamcha consistently does in the series, is he points out these little bits of symbology to the audience. We'll talk about it more as we get into more examples of it. But I think it's important to note that somebody who has mastered the desert, let's say, is able to identify things from their past, where Bulma, for example, is asleep completely, has not mastered the desert, and cannot identify things from their past.
Right.
And so that actually is going to be able to help him get out of this mess that he's put himself in.
Mm-hmm.
And so he recognizes this and, says, who was your grandfather? Who's your father? And actually, I don't think we have a clip of that.
Well, one thing he says, he recognized the power pole, and he says that it's the pole that extends forever. That's what he calls it. So,
in the dub or the sub?
I think the dub.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So the fact that he calls it that only cements it even further that he's aware of what he is lacking. He just thinks that he can steal it back right now, and he's going to learn that is not an option.
Right, he thinks he can just take it. He doesn't have to earn it. He can just take it. But I think it's also poignant to note that I'm glad you told me that is what he calls it in the dub, because I think that is indicative of what someone who's lost that might imagine, that thing can get you anywhere. And We'll see there are limitations to that.
And then, well, he comments on that, and then he tells Goku that he is no match for him, even with everything that Gohan could have taught him.
The arrogance and the deceit are all there.
But the thing is that Yamcha knows who Gohan is. So you can see that he is deceiving himself by saying that.
Right, he ought to know that that's not the case. Because, well, we haven't gotten to Gohan yet, but we will.
We will.
So, we can see that the deceit and arrogance of Yamcha here are his ultimate downfall, but he does try something before, which is nothing but a, let's say, a pretense. This whole attack is a pretense. It always has in the whole series. It always is going to be. It's not a real attack.
Are you talking about the Wolf Fang Fist?
I am.
His favorite thing to do?
His favorite thing to do.
It sort of became a meme on our rewatch.
It
Or
did.
not. Oh, I guess it's a rewatch, but that anything comes up, this calls for a Wolf Fang Fist. This jar is too tight.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a job for my Wolf Fang Fist.
Right. But the reason I say it's a pretense is that it is a pure expression of arrogance and deceit. Thinking that this attack, which was developed in the desert, right, which is developed for this tier of competency, would be useful against anyone even slightly more competent, is the whole joke.
Right, and there's obviously an element of, he is a lone wolf, and the way that he thinks that he is.
Right, it's measuring his ideal self, trying to match that with his actual self, and it not functioning the way he would think it does.
Right.
And that's why he thinks so highly of it, is because that's his actualized self, right? The lone wolf, when he's just a hyena.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he does the Wolf Fang Fist, doesn't work, and then Goku is about to teach him something, a harsh lesson.
Very harsh, super harsh. But is it Goku that teaches him it?
Well, does he learn it yet?
No, you're right on that. I do want to say here, though, I don't know if you have thought about this, but the idea that how Goku defeats Yamcha here.
Oh, I know.
Right? Yamcha just got done using his Wolf Fang Fist, which we already said was a pretense. So Goku also plays with him.
Oh, yeah. So Goku has a technique that he came up with on his own. Grandpa Gohan didn't teach it to him. This is his rock, paper, scissors technique.
Right. Which is play.
Which defeated the last bladed bandit that we saw with ease. And we'll see right here.
Killed him, basically.
Just destroyed him. And it's about the same for Yamcha. When he encounters this move, he is no match, as you'll see in the pictures.
Well, I think
we've got our rock, and he gets the rock, right? The first part of it, he totally gets. The beginning of play, he's like, aggression?
Got it.
I'm all about aggression.
Right.
But then...
then it comes the let's say willing blindness of Yamcha.
Sure.
To the fact that they're playing.
Or the fact that Yamcha
doesn't
realize.
Right, he doesn't
that he's
realize
playing right now.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And that he's losing.
Well, and the Wolf Fang Fist thing comes up again because that to Goku was play. Right.
Right. Goku interpreted that as play because Goku's already dominated this hierarchy, let's say.
He's already passed this tier of competence, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And
then comes the paper right here.
Just to really drive the point home that, yes, it is the concept of play that Yamcha just hasn't been able to wrap his head around. And I think...
he's still playing.
I think after this, we don't see the sword.
No, the sword's gone.
I think the sword is now no longer part of Yamcha's arsenal.
I think he's used one more time.
I can't remember.
Is
this my Oolong's hat call out? It's gonna be there like all through the next episode.
Could be.
I can see it now. I've just totally forgotten. But
yeah. I think it comes up one more time. But anyways, yeah. So we see all of the steps there.
Okay, so I do want to run back what I said as I think about it a bit more, because I think Yamcha is learning the lesson right now. I think there's evidence that he's learning it, and the first bit of evidence we have that he can learn it and that he is learning it is that he lives.
Right. He doesn't go unconscious, let's say.
Yes, he gets back up from this. And what happens next? It's a chef's kiss moment for the episode, I think.
It really brings it all together.
Oh yeah, it does. Because
so what happens next?
He is enraged now.
He's enraged, right? Blinding himself even more.
So blind now that he has no pupils. His eyes are completely white. And he rushes in to attack Goku, and he's so angry he's stomping and shaking the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what awakens Bulma. We should update the chat.
Okay, so right, the sword. What I'm saying is, I think the sword. Let me clarify this. The Yamcha using a sword will come back in another part, not this particular sword, and not in this particular way. So it's a different context, let's say. But yeah, I think it's the danger, right? The danger that awakens Bluma, because that's the archetypal female story, is to take a man who is dangerous, right? Like Beauty and the Beast.
And then civilize him down into a more structured, let's say useful,
but
still dangerous,
but serious, right?
Right. I think it's this ultimate expression of, if she didn't wake up, Yamcha was coming in with lethal intent. This was just a pure expression of aggression, right? And that was the only thing that would wake Bulma up here,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't think that necessarily he was playing. Well, he wasn't aware that he was playing, and Goku checked him and said, "Okay, like,
hey,
you're not using your full strength on me, so we're playing." And then Yamcha's like, "This isn't a game to me." He gets serious and embodies that aggression to the point that he's blinded with rage, and only that level of aggression and like masculine expression awakens the sleeping feminine.
Well, the willingly unconscious feminine, right?
Exactly.
Someone who has decided that she would rather not experience life, right? And that's the same way that happens with Belle, right? Is that she would rather trade places with her father and be with this beast than stay without having that connection to the masculine.
Right.
And so in this, she has this connection after she's just lost her capsules. She's found this man who is dangerous, competent, is able to not die to Goku, let's say.
He can traverse the desert.
He can square up with the embodiment of the Logos.
Yes.
He can face that personal challenge and not crumble completely.
Exactly. I think Yamcha is the first side character with this level of, aside from Bulma, obviously.
Bulma's not a side character. Bulma's a main character of the story.
Bulma's almost like the main character right now, but
yeah.
I would say, as far as non-Goku characters,
Goku.
I would say that he has sort of the most bite and substance to him. He is, everyone else so far has been almost a joke to Goku.
Oolong is morally weak, and Bluma sees competence in him, right? The beginning of the episode, and wants him to come along. Here, Bluma sees someone who is less morally weak.
Right.
Sees competence, and she does see competence right away.
well, you could say that Bulma not only sees competence, but is the force that recognizes and inspires confidence also.
Right. It
As the
calls
feminine
it
gaze.
calls forth that part. Hmm.
And so I just love the end of this episode with that analysis because, well, Yamcha is crippled by the idea of a beautiful woman, right?
He's crippled by the idea that he's not all he could be.
Exactly. Because all that he could be
is more than this shitty desert bandit.
Is more than just himself, and it's more than just the things he has.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad we do have this picture because Yamcha has learned part of his lesson, but he hasn't learned the whole lesson. And he is sitting across from the candle that was there, unlit from the beginning of the episode. The last episode ended with enlightenment, with Bulma holding the ball and being enlightened by it. But Yamcha has not reached enlightenment yet. And I think that the candle is put there unlit specifically for that reason. And
right.
And the way that it's framed here is it's like, in the first shot, it was kind of, it looked a bit smaller on the table and it wasn't directly like in front of the chair across from him, but now he is sitting across from the unlit candle. Like
staring at it.
He is not being enlightened.
Right. He is not being enlightened because he ran away.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. He ran away from the idea that he's not all he could be. But that actually is starting to sort out some of these hierarchies that are put in Dragon Ball, meaning that if you want one hierarchy that is higher than the other might be that just because you don't realize you're not all you could be doesn't mean you're a coward.
Right. I think that is...
That's the distinction between Oolong and Yamcha, right?
Well, we see here that the Yamcha is not giving up also.
Mm-hmm.
Because...
Right. It's not as big of a sin to run away from the fact that you're not all you could be as it is to be a coward.
Right. And as we're going to see in the next episode, Yamcha is not the type of character that Oolong is, in that he would run away and then consider that and then, turn into a missile, let's say, and fly to the next place that he could just embody those pathologies again. One could say that this is the final place. Once you move out of the desert, that is the direction that you go. So Yamcha is at that sort of, I guess you could call it the space of like the dark night of the spirit, where he now has to face the idea, fully he has to face the idea in order to be able to move out of the desert.
Well, and in order to get what he wants as well. And I don't know if he's heard about the Dragon Balls yet. I don't think so.
Not yet, no.
Okay, so we won't get into that. But we will.
But yeah, the lack of enlightenment too, I will point out that, he's not aware of the existence of the Dragon Balls yet also.
Right, he's not even aware of that. But I did want to put this up because we were talking briefly about the next episode. The next episode where Bulma is overjoyed to once again be in contact with a somewhat positive masculine force. Are there anything you want to say to wrap up the episode? Because as a whole, I think it's a great image of the interface between masculine and feminine. First being with Oolong, seeing competence, rejecting that responsibility, right, and then being manipulated. We see Yamcha. He is embodying not so great a sin, but a sin nonetheless. He is also refusing to wake up to that challenge that is being brought forth by the female spirit, and thus is not enlightened for it. Because it's really like the first half and the second half of the episode are two distinct parts.
Yeah, it's interesting with this episode. It's bisected by
it's very bisected, yeah.
The setup and then the payoff. I'm really surprised at how well structured and succinct these episodes are. because each one tells a story in and of itself and is a part of the greater mythos of Dragon Ball.
And
In
has
a
so
lot of
many
different ways.
symbolic take, or let's say it has such symbology to make the each frame. Like we had so many frames, almost 50. I
Right,
think on
there's
this
so
one.
little in this that is accidental. Like, I'm coming out of this episode and I know that there are aspects of it that we've missed. Not huge aspects,
Do you have anything written
but
down in
small
your
things.
notes?
Just glancing through it right now. Oh, well, my favorite note that I took was the way that this ends in the dub. Is Yamcha goes, "Those fools have not heard the last of Yamcha," and then the narrator goes, "It would seem our heroes haven't seen the last of Yamcha." It just cracked me up.
And they haven't. They haven't seen the last of what spirit Yamcha embodies, being determined. And that is one thing that Yamcha has, the determination, right? A determined spirit.
One thing that I did write down that I'd like to point out. So, Bulma doesn't witness anything that Yamcha does, except she sees that he's strong and capable and embodies a very masculine spirit. She just wakes up, doesn't see any of the fighting, and she basically sees he's strong and he's shy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is her entire idea of him. She's like wooed by him immediately, and then we get a cut of Oolong looking not exactly happy about that situation. He's and why would he be?
Well, I think that's the thing. The shyness is not the same thing as embarrassment.
Right. Well, she says, we'll get to it in the next episode. She's like, at least in the dub, she's like, "Oh, he's so handsome and he's so shy," and she loves that he's shy.
Right, but that's the thing. That's part of that civilizing.
Exactly. She sees the capacity,
which is different than the tendency to be overcome with embarrassment over your lack of self-consciousness. It's not so much embarrassment for Yamcha as it is
a self-consciousness that she is recognizing.
Right.
That I think she innately is attracted to because...
that competence, right.
Well, not just the competence. There's a self-consciousness that she is lacking, that she needs to build on, and that being self-conscious in that way, right? She's seeing herself have that effect on a masculine spirit, let's say, but without the manipulation. So she's seeing a way that she can have what she wants, but without being dishonest.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
And I think that is a powerful bookend for this episode.
Right, and it is the way forward for Bulma's character, because now she's already severed the ties from her past masculine figures, and now she needs to start repairing that relationship with the masculine, and now she's seeing, right, what you said. Here is a way that you can bring men to self-consciousness without sinning, missing the mark, let's say.
Without false modesty.
Sure. And that's the past ones, right? False modesty or manipulation, emotional manipulation.
Right.
And like we said, the first season, we might not talk about Goku that much. We did not talk about Goku that much in this episode, so...
Right.
Apologies.
I think Goku is there to... For a lot of these episodes, he's there to show what is going on with the other characters and how they are not.
And how they're not, exactly. I think this is a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, I think that this was a pretty straightforward episode. I think we both had the same direction we wanted to go with our analysis. So
somewhat.
There are definitely some aspects I hadn't thought about.
Right, for sure. You had some points that I hadn't thought about. I think it ultimately, though, encapsulates the interface between the masculine and the feminine, the ways to do it, the ways not to do it. I think that's what this episode is about. But if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, hit the like button, ring the bell for notifications. Remember, I'm Owl. I'm the host on your right.
I'm Brok, and I'm the host on the right.
Oh, you know that. All right, well, I'm Owl. I'm the host on your left. I'm tired. It's been almost 2 hours.
Yeah, Owl just got done traveling, so he still seems a little bit lagged.
I am a little bit lagged. Well, I also like worked all day today. I did all these trainings and oh goodness. I called all these people. Had to sort out some things, I had to do a bunch of chores today, so
Had to think.
I'm a little bit fried-o.
Well, I don't think it comes through in the episode. I think it was a good.
Oh, we had a good discussion. I'm just feeling at the tail end. I'm just feeling a little bit burnt out.
Well, as he was saying, if you enjoy it, make sure that you subscribe to us so that you'll see when we go live again. And
actually, we should talk about that a little bit.
I guess
we are going to continue. We are going to do episodes now, doing it on Thursdays and Sundays.
That's the plan for now. We've said it before.
We're going to stick to it. So
we're going to try
consistent.
to stick to it this time. It's a bit less of us trying to just strike while the iron's hot. I think we've kind of settled into what the analysis is going to be, and we don't need to rush into it. We also kind of rushed because it was right before the holidays, and we wanted to get some thoughts out while they were fresh.
Right, exactly. We didn't want to get them too stale before we delivered them to you, beautiful and amazing people. But we are going to continue. So this Thursday will be the next episode, and then don't expect an episode until Sunday if you're watching live, which I know we have a few subscribers now, so I want to be courteous to them. I don't ever want to treat anyone as insignificant, let's say. If anyone watches our stuff, I'm thrilled to have that be the case. So yes, I'm the host on your left, Owl.
And I'm Brok, the host on the right.
And this was Get the Mic, episode 5, Yamucha, the Desert Bandit.